They thought she was just another contractor, another quiet woman in work boots with calloused hands and a blank stare. No ribbons, no salutes. No one paid attention when she walked onto the range that morning at Fort Bragg, clutching a worn toolbox and wearing a faded brown jacket 2 sizes too big. But someone should have. The elite training grounds buzzed with testosterone and pride. Operators fine-tuned rifles, instructors barked corrections, and contractors chatted about the latest gear. Amidst it all, Ellen Carter moved like a ghost, silent, unnoticed, practically invisible, until someone decided she didn't belong. "Hey, sweetheart," called out Master Sergeant Rick Coleman, loud enough to turn heads. "You sure you're in the right place? Coffee shop's back that way." Laughter rolled across the yard, not one chuckle, a chorus. Ellen didn't respond. She never did. She simply set her box down next to a jammed M4 rifle and knelt quietly, eyes focused on the mechanism. But Coleman wasn't done. He had a point to prove. "You know what?" he sneered, pacing toward her. "Let's make this official. Everyone. How about we give our lovely contractor here a chance to prove her expertise?" "More Snickers," someone muttered. "Gonna teach us how to clean toilets with that wrench?" Coleman smirked as he set a sand-caked SR-25 sniper rifle on the table with a loud thud. "This baby's been acting up. Let's see if Blondie here can figure out why." The group leaned in, waiting for her to flinch, for her to panic, for her to prove them right. But Ellen said nothing. She didn't blink. She ran her fingers gently over the weapon like a surgeon inspecting an old patient. Coleman chuckled under his breath. This'll be good. What none of them knew, what none of them could have known, was that the woman they mocked with a mop had once held that same rifle in the mountains of Afghanistan and made it sing. But here, now, she said nothing. Instead, Ellen slowly turned a hex tool with practiced precision, her grip steady, her breathing slow. The laughter faded as the room settled into a strange hush. It was the quiet that comes before a stormer after a kill. And still, she said nothing. Coleman didn't like it. He paced closer, leaning over her shoulder. "You got a name, princess? Or do we just call you Maintenance Barbie?" She didn't even look at him, but when she reached for a cloth and wiped the buffer tube with a single smooth motion, the way her sleeve pulled back caught his eye. There it was. Just the edge of something. Ink. A dark, precise tattoo barely visible beneath her skin. Coleman stared. His smirk faltered for the first time, but the moment passed. She tugged the sleeve back down. The others didn't notice. They were still too busy sizing her up, searching for weakness in the woman they thought they understood. She looked like someone's aunt, someone who packed lunchboxes and clipped coupons. Not a warrior, not a threat. But something in her posture, something in the way she never defended herself, unnerved them. Coleman scoffed and turned away. "Yeah, that's what I thought." And then, like it was nothing, he barked another order. Carter, get those latrines cleaned and mop the hallway while you're at it. You want to be useful, don't you?" A few heads turned. Even some of the younger SEALs shifted uncomfortably. The command was unusually harsh, deliberately degrading. Ellen rose slowly. No words. Just a small nod as she wiped her hands and picked up a mop that had been leaning near the wall. Her hands were still stained with oil and carbon dust, her knuckles raw. The hallway stretched long and glossy under fluorescent lights. Each swish of the mop echoed louder than the last. Soldiers walked by, boots clacking, glancing her way with awkward smiles or deliberate silence. Some rolled their eyes, others avoided her completely. She was the ghost in the room again. But Coleman wasn't done. He made sure every moment was public, every order humiliating. When brass from headquarters arrived unannounced, he positioned Ellen front and center, scrubbing the base of a urinal. Then he watched them glance her way, smirk, and move on. No one questioned it. She never defended herself. To them, she was just a contractorone of the thousands who came and went, fixing what broke and disappearing when no one needed them. But what if she didn't come here to be seen? What if she came here to watch? That night, as the range emptied and the chatter died, Ellen laced up her old combat shoes and ran the perimeter in silence. 3 miles, one for Marcus, one for David, one for James. She did it every night. No one noticed, but maybe that was the point. Some ghosts weren't meant to be remembered. They were meant to remember us. Ellen Carter didn't ask for respect. She didn't need it. What she needed was for the rifles to work, for the sights to be true, for the weapons to cycle clean under stress. That was her language. That was how she spoke. So while others laughed or scoffed, she just listened. That same SR-25 Coleman had thrown on her table, she hadn't forgotten. Neither had he. The next morning, when she returned to the range before sunrise, she had already disassembled it. Not with a flourish, not to prove a point, but with the quiet care of someone who understood what was at stake when a weapon failed. When Coleman swaggered back in, sipping black coffee and barking morning orders, the rifle sat reassembled silent, waiting. He narrowed his eyes at it, then at her. "You think it's fixed, Princess?" Ellen didn't answer. She simply nodded once. "You test-fire it?" he challenged. "No," she said calmly. "It doesn't need it." He scoffed and grabbed the rifle. "Let's see what kind of magic your mop can do." They gathered at the range. Operators lined up, amused. Some leaned on barricades. Others folded arms across tactical vests, waiting for her to fail. Coleman squeezed the trigger. One round. Then another. Then a clean 5-round burst. Not a hiccup. No failure to feed. No stovepipes. Just crisp, clean fire. He inspected the ejection port, the grouping. Tight, dead center. He tried not to show it, but everyone noticed the SR-25 hadn't worked that well in months. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Damn, she fixed that thing without even firing it? She didn't even check the bolt pressure. How'd she know? She didn't guess, someone whispered. She knew. Coleman forced a shrug. Beginner's luck, he grunted, but his jaw had tightened. Something was off, something about her rhythm, her methods. She didn't just fix weapons, she handled them like they were part of her. And when one of the SEAL candidates tried to chat her up later, something about scopes and ballistics, she corrected him, gently but with surgical precision. She knew the recoil coefficient of his setup, and how it would fail under wet conditions. She cited the exact grain shift he'd get with the .308 rounds stored near the diesel tanks. He stared at her like she'd just spoken Latin. It wasn't just knowledge. It was experience. But where had she learned it? She never bragged, never hinted. She wore her silence like armor. Still, the signs began to stack up. Someone saw her adjust a rail mount without a level, just by tilting it against the horizon. Another watched her replace a trigger group in under 40 seconds. A few of the more seasoned contractors started whispering. She's not just a gunsmith. Bet she was intel, maybe special ops support. Who taught her those hand signals? They had questions. She gave no answers. Even Wilson, the newly assigned lieutenant commander, noticed. He'd seen her from across the range. The way she moved wasn't civilian. The way she scanned every exit when a Black Hawk passed overhead, it was trained, conditioned. He started watching her closely. She wasn't just avoiding attention, she was managing it. One afternoon, as a malfunctioning M249 was being passed around from contractor to contractor, Coleman tossed it on Ellen's table like a dead animal. "Here," he said loud again. "Let's see if our mop queen can handle a real piece of equipment." She said nothing. She just started working. No manual, no hesitation. She unfastened the feed tray, inspected the firing pin, checked the locking lug, then paused. Her brow creased. With a quiet motion, she reached into her vest and pulled out a custom-made torque driver. Not regulation, not standard issue, but military grade that hadn't been manufactured in almost 10 years. Wilson's eyebrows rose. He knew that tool. He'd seen it used in the field, but not by armorers. By operators. As Ellen worked, Coleman leaned in once more. "Tell me something," he muttered just for her to hear. "What's your game, Carter? You trying to impress someone? Think if you play soldier long enough, we'll start saluting you." Her hand froze for just a second, then kept moving. But Coleman noticed that second. She never flinched before. Why now? That evening, as the sun dipped behind the range barriers, Wilson stayed behind. He stood in the shadows and watched Ellen finish cleaning a disassembled Glock with almost monastic focus. When she reassembled it, she checked chamber pressure by sound. He'd only ever seen that once. In Kandahar, by a woman who vanished after a black op went sideways. A woman they called Ghost. But that was impossible. Ghost was dead, or buried in a file so redacted you couldn't even read the date. Still, Wilson's hand drifted to his encrypted phone. He hesitated. Not yet. He needed one more sign, And the next morning he got it. As Ellen lifted a scope to a new rifle, the sleeve of her jacket rolled just a hair too high. Wilson's breath caught in his throat. There it was. A seal trident. Stylized, unique, with 4 stars. And just beneath the crest, in ink so small, it could only be read with time and reverence, 3 names. Lieutenant Commander James Wilson couldn't breathe. His eyes were locked on the ink beneath Ellen Carter's sleeve, just a flicker of it, but enough. The custom seal trident, the 4 stars, the names etched like whispers from the dead. He'd seen that design once, in a file so restricted he couldn't even screenshot the header. Operation Crimson Shield, Afghanistan, 3 KIA, 1 survivor. Codename, Ghost. And now, Ghost was wiping down a rifle bench in Fort Bragg like a ghost janitor no one respected. Wilson stepped back from the range. He unlocked his encrypted device and typed in the names slowly. Carter, Ellen, Cross, reference, Mitchell, Sarah. Nothing. Everything was redacted. But one call sign repeated. Ghost. Wilson turned, heart pounding. Could it be? He remembered that mission. Not the classified parts, but the impact, the whispers afterward. About a female SEAL who made it back carrying over 200 pounds of gear and her teammate's body until Taliban fire made her drop him. The one who refused medals, who resigned quietly, who vanished. And now, the very man who mocked her daily was standing 10 feet away, utterly oblivious to who he'd been ridiculing for months. Wilson's mouth went dry. He had to know for sure. He walked across the gravel, careful but deliberate, straight toward Ellen. "Chief Mitchell," he said, barely above a whisper, "is that you?" The world stopped. The range went quiet. Ellen froze completely. Then, slowly, she turned to face him. Her expression didn't change, but Wilson saw it, the flicker of recognition, the steel behind the silence. He snapped to attention and saluted. Loudly, clearly, firmly. "Chief Petty Officer Mitchell saved my life in Kandahar, 2019. My entire squad owes her everything." A shockwave rolled through the range. Operators froze mid-motion. Several dropped what they were holding. A couple of SEALs standing nearby instinctively straightened. And Master Sergeant Coleman, who had just walked, instead, blinking, as if someone had spoken in a foreign language. "Wait, what?" he choked. Wilson didn't move. "Master Sergeant," he said flatly, "you've been humiliating Chief Mitchell, the first woman to complete the crucible. The operator who pulled 23 Americans out of Syria when everyone else said it was impossible. The one who holds the record for confirmed kills in a single op. Every word hit like a bullet. She wrote the infiltration doctrine your team trains with. The manual with the initials SM? That's her." Coleman's face turned pale. The men around him were no longer snickering. They were backing away. Their heads lowered, some were already saluting. But Ellen didn't speak. She just stood there, calm, collected, and absolutely unbothered by the chaos unraveling around her. Until, finally, Coleman croaked, "This can't be right." And then Ellen rolled up her sleeve. No dramatics, just quiet resolve. The full tattoo emerged, the modified trident, the stars, the names etched with surgical precision. Marcus Chen, David Rodriguez, James Thompson. Beneath them, 2 words, never forgotten. Several men took a step back. One dropped to one knee, another choked on his breath, and then, unexpectedly, Frank Torres, the senior armorer, stepped forward. In silence, he rolled up his own sleeve. Another trident. Rodriguez's name marked with a black band. "She's not the only ghost here," Torres said softly. "Rodriguez was my swim buddy. When I heard she was working this base, I transferred. Someone had to keep watch." Nobody moved. The moment weighed like thunderclouds. But then came a crack of lightning no one expected. Coleman collapsed to his knees. Tears streaked down his face. His voice cracked. "James Thompson was my cousin," he whispered. "We grew up together, different services. He told me about you, said if anything happened to him, you'd blame yourself, that you were the best officer he ever served under." Ellen's face didn't change, but her body swayed slightly, like the wind had hit her chest. She stared at him, this man who had tormented her, shamed her, mocked her. And all this time, he'd been mourning too. "I hated you," he admitted, shaking, "because he died. and you lived." Ellen didn't answer right away. Then softly, barely audible, "I made a promise in that valley, and I've kept it every day since." Before anyone could speak again, a black SUV rolled up, doors opened. General Patricia Hayes stepped out with her staff. She surveyed the scene with military precision, then met Ellen's eyes. "We need you, Chief Mitchell." "I left that world behind," Ellen replied calmly. Hayes nodded. "And your brothers died so others could live. Honor them by teaching. Help us build something better." A long pause. Then Ellen's hand moved, not to salute, but to gently trace the names on her forearm. Finally, she said, "One condition." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "He trains with me." Ellen nodded toward Coleman. His head snapped up in shock. "He needs to learn what real strength looks like." Hayes blinked once, then nodded. "Approved." And just like that, everything changed. No press, no fanfare, no rank reinstated. Ellen didn't ask for it. She didn't want revenge. She wanted change. And she was about to deliver it in her own quiet, devastating way. At 0500 hours, before the sun even considered rising over Fort Bragg, a group of women stood in formation on the gravel, young, determined, nervous. Candidates for a brand new training program, the first of its kind created for female special operations hopefuls. They didn't know what to expect. Whispers had spread, of course, about a contractor with strange skills, about a new instructor no one had seen before, about a woman with a tattoo she never explained. And then she stepped onto the field. No rank, no medals, no ceremony. Just Ellen Carter, hood up, sleeves rolled down, face expressionless. Behind her, shadowing like a quiet sentinel, stood Master Sergeant Coleman, now stripped of arrogance and carrying only the weight of memory. Ellen's voice was calm and direct. "Your enemy won't care about your gender. Bullets don't care either." She moved through demonstrations like breath through wind, teaching techniques for leverage, not brute strength, showing them how to disarm a man twice their size, how to carry a wounded teammate uphill under fire. And when one woman whispered, "But I'm not strong enough," Ellen didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "Neither was I, until I had to be." Coleman watched from the sidelines, silent, still learning. He'd expected rage, retaliation, punishment. Instead, he got grace. Ellen involved him in drills, referred to him by name, even nodded in approval when he corrected a candidate's posture with gentleness and respect. By the second week, he began staying after hours, asking questions, listening more than talking. One evening as they packed up, Coleman spoke quietly. "My daughter's 16, he said. "She told me last week. She wants to enlist." Ellen didn't flinch, just nodded. "Then let's make sure she enters a military better than the one we did." From that moment forward, Coleman changed. Not just as a soldier, but as a father, a teacher, a man. And the change rippled. Other instructors followed suit. Mockery faded. Standards remained high, but fairness returned. Respect wasn't demanded. It was earned through shared effort and quiet integrity. By the end of the 8-week cycle, 3 candidates passed selection. The highest female success rate in the program's short history. At graduation, Coleman gave a short speech. "I used to think strength looked a certain way," he said, scanning the crowd. "But these women and their instructor showed me that real strength is quiet and relentless and unstoppable." Ellen didn't stand on stage. She watched from the back. The next morning, she was gone. No announcement, no medal ceremony, no farewell. Just an empty locker. And a folded note left on Coleman's desk. "Heroes are the ones who didn't come home. Let them rest in peace. The rest of us? We carry on." Weeks passed. Then months. Reporters came sniffing around, eager for the ghost story. Some claimed to know her name. Others offered 6-figure book deals. But Coleman refused every interview. "I disrespected someone," he told one persistent journalist, "who could have killed me with a paperclip. She didn't. She taught me instead. That tells you everything you need to know." No articles were written. No photos went viral. And still, things began to change. The Ghost Foundation appeared first as a whisper. Then as a trickle of anonymous donations, combat trauma research, scholarships for Gold Star children, equipment upgrades for underfunded training programs, always unsigned, always quiet, but always reaching those who needed it most. One day, Coleman received a plain envelope. Inside, a challenge coin with engraved coordinates. He followed them. They led to a remote field in Montana, tucked between wildflowers and wind. There, a small metal trident stood planted in the ground. 3 stars, 3 names. Chen, Rodriguez, Thompson. No plaque, no sign. Just a place of stillness, a place for ghosts. Someone maintained it. The footprints in the grass said so. From that day forward, Coleman returned every year. Sometimes alone, sometimes with his daughter. She enlisted at 18, entered a military transformed by her father's humility and one woman's silent power. At her graduation ceremony, among the crowd, Coleman spotted a figure in civilian clothes standing near the edge. Hood up, hands in pockets. She gave one nod, and then disappeared. Again. Years passed, but her influence didn't fade. One of her trainees led a hostage rescue that saved 30 lives in Mali. Another developed a battlefield trauma protocol that reduced fatal bleeds by 70%. They didn't brag, they didn't pose for magazines, but they carried her words like armor. Be so good their opinions become background noise. They taught it to others, passed it down, quietly, steadily. One generation of ghosts training the next. And back in Montana, as the sun crested over the ridge, Ellen Carter ran her eternal 3 miles. 1 for Marcus, 1 for David, 1 for James. 3 shell casings jingled quietly in her pockets, smoothed by time and memory. She didn't run for glory. She ran to remember. Because strength doesn't shout. It walks in silence, it fixes what's broken, it serves without credit, and when its work is done, it fades, leaving the world better than it found it. Ellen Carter was never meant to be famous. She was meant to be forgotten, so that others could stand in the light,